Hey everyone, today I want to do an ownership video talking about my Shelby GT350R. I've owned the car for about a year and a half now, and since then I've put about 1,500 miles on it. Now I don't daily drive it, I don't track it, I just use it as a street car, run errands in it, and just have some fun spirited drives in the car. Now if you've been following the channel for a while, I had a 2000 Cobra R, I had a Viper. With this car I had a little bit of a different buyer's experience. With all the other cars I had done many years of research, I knew exactly what I was getting into. With this car, I had kind of been looking into them since I didn't have a sports car anymore, and once they announced in the beginning of 2020 that they were going to be discontinuing this car, I really jumped on it really quick. I was really late to the game, however, I got really lucky because though I couldn't find an allocation from one of my local dealers, I knew I wanted a very specific spec car, like most people will who are looking at something like this. And I happened to find it built at a dealer, and they were asking MSRP. So that was early 2020, before car prices went absolutely insane and absolutely exploded. So I got very lucky. The exact spec, exact color I wanted, at a dealer in stock at MSRP. So I was very fortunate. I know some people have a very difficult time getting these things, especially towards the end, but I was very fortunate despite me not having researched this. Now, since I hadn't been researching it for years, I wasn't 100% sure what I was getting into, but I decided after watching countless videos online, everything from smaller local owners to big YouTubers, everybody ranted and raved about this car, what it was, how amazing it was, the unique characteristics of this thing. So I felt pretty confident that I'm probably gonna like this car, and that has held to be absolutely true. This is an incredible car. There are so many unique features and aspects on this car that 6 years ago you never would have thought Ford would ever put on a Mustang. Flat plane crank V8, carbon fiber wheels for a car that started, I believe, in the $60,000 range is absolutely incredible. This is an absolutely amazing car. From the looks, it's very distinctive from a regular Mustang, even though it uses the same S550 platform. A lot of the features they put on this car really made it stand out. The black accent pieces, the bigger splitter, the wider front fenders. With the 350Rs, you got the wing. So it is much noticeable from a regular Mustang. And I get a lot of thumbs up from a lot of car enthusiasts that really know what this thing is. I think this car really helped bring a lot of enthusiasts that were into European and Japanese cars into the American market when they saw what an American company was capable of doing. So like I said, I really like the way the front fenders are a little bit wider on this car. I think it gives the car a really unique profile. It sticks out a little bit more. The front fender vents are functional, as is the hood vent on this car. So this isn't just some vent they put on for looks. This is actually functional, and it does help to vent heat out of the car. I really love the look on the front of this car. Simple, nothing crazy, just a simple badge on the side. Really makes it distinguishable from a standard Mustang, especially with the way the front fascia is set up. You have all LED headlights, same thing with the turn signals, so it is distinct, and it's nice having the modern 21st century electronics in this car. So this has a tech package on it, so it's got turn signals on the mirrors, and as well you have LED lighting in the back, and then the turn signals are sequential. Now, one of the points of contention with this car that I've seen many people bring up is the build quality regarding things like the panel gaps. Now, this holds true for not just 350s, but also regular Mustangs, regular GTs or base model cars. You don't buy this car for the build quality. It should not deter you from buying this car, but it's definitely not that good. Like, you can look on my car here. This part sticks out on this side, but it doesn't stick out on this side. The gaps weren't good. I actually had the dealer, my local dealer, readjust the hood because it was so close to the fender. I was worried about it rubbing. You can see here too, this doesn't really line up. This is normal. This is not an indication of, oh my God, the car's been in an accident, it's been apart. That's normal with these cars. It's just something you have to deal with. They're not perfect. My opinion is, I think Ford could have done a better job. Now, again, I know people argue with me, oh, you don't buy this car for the panel gaps. Yes, you're absolutely right. You don't buy it for the panel gaps, but here's the thing. My little throwaway $17,000 daily driver Toyota Corolla that has razor thin profit margins because it's such a cheap car has perfect panel gaps. So if they can do it on a cheap basic car like that, they really should, I think, put a little bit better effort into it on a car like this, just because of what this car represents. But not a big deal. Like I said, don't let it deter you from owning a car like this. It's just a little nuance about the car. And with this being the 350R, Another huge point of contention with this car are the carbon fiber wheels. An amazing thing Ford did with this car. So many of the 350R owners get this thing home the first day and they take the wheels off. I street drive my carbons. Where I live, the roads are very well kept. Potholes are few and far between. And typically, being in New Jersey where we have some pretty harsh winters, I don't drive the car in the winter. As soon as they say the weather's starting to change, once they put salt down on the roads, game over. This thing does not leave the garage till the spring, till the roads are clean and the potholes are filled. Now, people think these wheels are really weak, but I think Carbon Revolution did a really nice job making these wheels very, very strong. I don't think they're as flimsy or as weak as people make them out to be. And I feel like putting an aftermarket wheel on this car, no matter what it is going to be a downgrade from a carbon fiber wheel. If you put a cheap aftermarket wheel on, which I think is, you're nuts for doing that, but even a high-end aluminum wheel, I think that just kind of defeats the purpose. If you're so worried about the cost of these wheels, should you damage one some way, to go out and spend thousands and thousands of dollars to replace it with aluminum set just kind of seems counterintuitive. I'm not overly concerned with damaging a wheel. If it does happen and it's that bad where it cannot be fixed by one of the places that fixes carbon fiber wheels, I'll just replace it. It's okay. It's not a big deal. One thing you're also going to notice if you street drive your carbons is because these Cup 2s shotgun rocks everywhere, the clearance is extremely tight between the caliper and the wheel, so you might start to get some little, I think I have a couple right there, a couple little scratches on the barrel of the wheel. That is normal. That's just because the clearance is so tight that rocks get wedged between the caliper and the inner barrel, and it scratches them up a little bit. It's not a big deal. They'll get scratched, but you'll enjoy the car. I have found that just using a very light, gentle pressure washer is really good for cleaning the barrels on these things. I see people do all kinds of elaborate things, trying to clean them, scrub them, steam clean them. A nice, not your monster gas pressure washer, but a nice low pressure, mine's like 1200 PSI, with a nice wide tip, cleans those barrels out really nice, because this being a performance car with performance pads, the wheels get dirty very, very quickly. I think I drove this car once since I washed it last, and and the wheels are already dirty. So that's pretty much something you always have to deal with this car. They get dirty really quick, and that's it. But probably about once a year, I pull the wheels and I'll power wash the barrels out, and they look really good. They look basically almost like they did when they were new. Now, another real important thing for this car is Ford put a mud flap, or basically rock guard, on the back wheel. They didn't put one on the front from the factory. Now, I know there's little rubber plugs you can get and put in here, but that doesn't really protect the car from getting rocks shot up along the side of it. So a bunch of companies make these. This is the Jaeger Brothers. You need some sort of flap on here. You can't see it on the camera, but there's already a ton of little dings in here from rocks being bounced off of it. But get some sort of mud flap for a 350. Just do it. They're not expensive, and it's going to help protect the side of the car. Also, when you have this car and it's in the garage or someplace where you're walking close to it, with the R models, the splitter sticks out much further than the standard cars, especially the corner here. So just be careful. You don't want to accidentally hit it with your foot when you're walking by it. It should be pretty sturdy, but just be careful. I also put a set of slip lows on this to help scrape. They definitely saved the bottom of the splitter a couple of times. I did a separate video on that. Good, universal, inexpensive way to protect the splitter. They're fairly expensive. And then underneath, I also threw a jacking rail on. Not too heavy, and it makes it really safe to jack the car up when I want to pull the wheels or do some maintenance on it. Don't have to worry about folding over a pinch weld. I've seen that happen, and that's terrible to do that. On the back of the car, you want to be real careful with this wing. This thing is like, I heard rumors it was like $10,000, so I actually had to look it up for myself, and people were right. This is like a $10,000 part. It's carbon fiber, but it's not really a light carbon fiber part, and it's just incredibly overpriced. So you want to be real careful about this wing that you don't damage it, because putting on another OEM one would be really, really expensive. But I like the badging on this car. It's very distinct. All our models have red badging. Standard 350s, they're like a gray color, so it's very noticeable. Bottom fascia, the exhaust tips these tips are actually built into the bumper, and then in there you see the separate pipe from it, and these got holes in the bottom that's basically to let rocks drain out of it. With these sticky tires, you're going to find pebbles and rocks everywhere on this car. You find it on the underbody trays underneath, you find it in the wheel wells. Any place that a little pebble or rock can get, you're just going to find it on or around the car. So this color is race red. This color was available every year, but a lot of people shied away from this color. I really like it. It matches my Raptor, and it's a color that I don't see a lot. That was what also made it hard to find this car initially. I found tons of blacks and blues and whites, but red was hard to find. I think they only made, this is a 2020 model, so this was the final year of production. And I think they only made about 9 of them. So it's a pretty rare color, even though it was offered every year. Not a lot of people actually opted for the race red, which I do like. All right, so let's go take a look at the power plant of this car. The 5.2 Voodoo V8, flat plane crank, which really became a buzzword after this car came out. A lot of European cars that had flat plane cranks for a while, but this was something extremely new and exotic for an American company to do. Okay. Real simple, real basic, no forced induction, 4 valves per cylinder, flat plane crank. If you're watching this video, you probably know all about this engine. 526 horsepower and I believe 429 pounds of torque, which is all made in mid to high range. Really no low end power on this car. It's not designed for that. It's designed to rev very high and be at high RPMs for a long time. The biggest concern I had when looking for one of these cars was this engine. There are so many people talking about all the engine failures on this, and it made me a little bit nervous. Now, if you really take everything into account and read between the lines, what I think was really the issue with these cars was this is a production race engine. This is designed to be driven hard. This is not built to the same tolerance or specifications that your regular cookie cutter basic car is going to be. This is designed for track use, for high RPMs. And this car was, especially the early Gen 1, the early engines on this car, they were designed to consume a lot of oil, more than your average car would. So something like 500 or every 1,000 miles, if it ate a quart of oil, that was pretty normal. Now, there were people that had engine replacements on these things because of really excessive oil consumption, like a quart every 100, 200 miles. But I don't remember what the exact specs were from Ford, but if it ate a quart every 500,000 miles, that was normal. So I think what was happening was people would be driving these things, not checking the oil enough, especially on something that would consume so much oil. And now you're driving 2,000, 3,000 miles, you haven't checked the oil, and the thing's down 3 or 4 quarts, and you're running that thing to 8,000 RPM, and the thing's down 3, 4 quarts of oil. Because someone did a really good job compiling the information about a lot of these engine failures, and a lot of them definitely have the plausibility that they were related to low oil problems, things like spun bearings, snap connecting rods, things like that. Some of it may have been a strength issue. For Generation 2 motors, the 19s and the 20s, they significantly reinforced the engine, stronger GT500 block, they beefed up the internals, they made a lot of changes. There were a bunch of failures with these Gen 2 engines, but it seems like the overwhelming majority of them are contributed to flawed production. There was an issue, they did a recall on it, that the secondary timing chain tensioners were not properly deployed from the factory, and the data based on the collection from a lot of 350 owners were that it came down to primarily a single person. So that's as much as I'm going to say. There's a lot of information on the forums about it, but it looks like there was an issue with them being properly assembled at the factory because they were eating the valves, because they were jumping time. So, but I mean, other than that, I think it's a great motor. It's so unique. It's an incredible engine that Ford did. The fact that they even got into an endeavor like this is incredible. I give Ford a lot of credit. I don't think you'll ever see an engine like this again in a Mustang. This is really unique, and it was just a great thing to try. And I think overall, despite all the negative press this got with the engine failures, I think it was a good move. I think it was incredible that they even undertook something like this. So, and another part that made this car really track capable was all the coolers they put on. Early GT350s, it was optional, but you got coolers on everything trans, differential, and it's just an amazing track car. You have a huge set of brakes on the car, 15.5 inch. It was the biggest set of front brakes they could wedge under these 19-inch wheels. They're 15-inch in the rear. The fronts are 6-piston caliper. The backs are 4s. So you have a tremendous amount of braking power on this car, and it stops incredibly well. Dead straight, no shimmying in the wheel. It just stops as well as it goes. So let's take a look inside the car. Now, the 350Rs really didn't have as many options as the regular cars. You had no options for seats in the R models. It just came with this one seat. The early years, you didn't have the red bolstering on here. 19s and 20s, they threw the red bolstering on. Now, with the standard cars, It came with the Recaro seat, which was the exact same dimensions as this seat was, just the covering design was different. And then you could opt for the leather trimmed sports seat. So the R models have the red stitching on them, so it makes them distinct in that manner. Obviously, rear seat delete. So just a simple pad back here just to take the place of where the back seat would have been. Ford Performance kick panel, nice little piece on there that they did. Probably the biggest point of contention on the R models, or really the Shelbys in general, was this carbon fiber dash panel. I've heard so many people say, don't get this, oh my gosh, it makes glare, you can't see. I think a lot of that was people guessing that was an issue. I know one owner said he had an issue with it, but even before I had tint on my windows, I never had a problem. I really like this panel. I think it's absolutely beautiful, and I've never had glare with it at all, but it's a nice, beautiful piece of real carbon fiber. It's not some cheap stamped simulated carbon fiber piece. So same thing with the passenger seat. It's covered with the same material. If you got one of those Heritage models, they don't have the red bolstering, but they have the red stitching, I believe, in them. The seats are a little bit tight. The bolsters are very close to being vertical. So I'm 5'8", about 180 pounds. It's not tight on me, but it's pretty snug in this car. My 2000 Cobra R, the bolsters were a little bit more, they weren't quite as vertical, so you had a little bit more room, but it's definitely tight in here for larger people. But because of that, they hold you very well. And this beautiful Alcantara covering really holds onto your clothes, and you don't move around in this car when you are driving it. Everyone got a chassis plate. The R models, it's red. This is actually the only place that says R on a 350R from the factory, along with the chassis number. This is LR108. And then on the inside of the car, same thing. You have the Alcantara covered steering wheel, the red piece on the center, the Cobra logo on this. And compared to like my other Mustang, it's amazing the amount of tech and adjustability and information in this car. So you have your traditional analog gauges. I'll turn this thing on so everything wakes up. I like the mechanical style gauges. I know they're starting to go to digital ones, but I really like the mechanical look on these things. And you have so much adjustability and information at your fingertips. So you can just do everything from your simple displays on it. You can do tire pressure and everything from oil temperature, transmission temperature, axle temperature. They have cylinder head temperature, oil pressure, and all these are real gauges. They aren't just like indicator gauges. There is so much information available on this car. And then if we want to do performance-related stuff, you can go into your track apps. There's just so much adjustability on this car. It's absolutely incredible, the amount of information that this thing provides compared to even cars from just a few years ago. They do really put a ton of stuff on here. So whether you're driving it around or tracking it, there's lots of information on here. I mean, this is, like I said, a tech package car. It's got blind spots and cross traffic, and there's just so much on here. So, I mean, accelerometers, you talk about brake performance, launch control. There's just tons and tons of tech on here. And this is kind of where cars are going. But yet this is still enough of an analog car where you can enjoy for what it is. You can turn this stuff off if you really don't like it, but there's almost really no reason to. And down on the steering wheel, you have everything from your drive mode. So whether you want to change something individually or you can go into the modes, you have normal, sport, track, drag strip, and then slippery. So you don't really want to drive this car in the wet with these Cup 2s on it. So lots and lots. And if you do it this way, it changes all the settings. If you want, you can change things individually. Things like the steering setting, you can do normal, sport, or comfort. You can change the shock dampeners from normal or sport. With the exhaust, you can do normal or sport. So there's so much adjustability to your exact likings on this car. Down here you have launch control to turn it on, traction control off, hazards, your climate controls, just real basic climate controls, no heated, cooled seats in this thing. You can get that in the standard car, but not this one. This has the B&O sound system having the tech package on it, and then up here you have two real gauges, a real oil pressure gauge and a real temp gauge. Now, this car uses 550 oil, not that thin 020 stuff that they use in some of the other cars. So you really want to take it easy on this car when you first drive, because the oil is really thick and you don't really want to hammer it till you get up to temperature. When you start this thing, even on a warm day, if the car is cold, you have over 100 pounds of pressure at idle. So a lot of pressure. So you should be gentle on the car when you first fire it up. But pretty basic in here. I don't think it's as terrible. People say, oh, this car has a terrible interior. I don't think it's that bad. They kind of went to a couple more soft touch interiors on some of these later cars. I think it looks pretty nice in this car. Yeah, it's not a Porsche, but it doesn't cost excessively expensive money. You can get these things. I mean, now the prices are up considerably, but when this car was new, it was $77,000. And I think it's a really beautiful car. I think they put some incredible features on it for the money. Now, I think they really dialed in the ergonomics on this car as well. The shifter is in a good position. You can reach it. It wasn't like the old generations where you really had to reach your arm out to get to the shifter. It's not far away, so you're not reaching for these remote-mounted shifters. It has a mechanical handbrake. Awesome. Keep it simple. Just a basic mechanical handbrake. And that's pretty much it to the interior. It's not tight, but it's not huge. You have plenty of headroom in here. I have a good amount of room, and you can adjust the seats manually up and down and back and forth, so you have a fair amount of adjustability on this car. So now I think it's time we take it out and go for a drive. All right, so out on the road, the first thing you're going to notice when you start to drive this car is how incredibly precise the steering is. It is incredible. Just the slightest, even a little bit of pressure on one side of the wheel, and the car just starts to turn, which is absolutely incredible. When you figure how many parts are between the steering wheel and the tires, there is no play, there is no slop, there is no on-center vagueness. The steering in this car is absolutely incredible. The suspension is also, I think, very well dialed in for this car. It doesn't beat you up on, nice, well-paved, non-bumpy streets, but it's pretty stiff. Even in normal mode, which I drive around in most of the time, you don't feel beat up when you drive this car. And you go around a corner, and it handles very flat around the corner. If you want a little bit more, you like a real sporty, stiff ride, you can put it in sport, and you will notice that it stiffens it up. Obviously, you only have two settings on the suspension in this car, normal and sport. All right, the power plant, the 5.2 Voodoo V8. If you're used to driving cars, especially American cars, Mustangs, Vettes, Vipers, stuff with lots of cylinders and lots of displacement, this is going to feel very different from those cars. This being the flat plane crank, you really have to get into the RPMs to make power. I had my Cobra R. That thing would usually had some good low-end power, but you'd feel a pickup with the 4 valves. You'd feel it start to pick up like the 3,000, 3,500. This car down low, very little power. It doesn't have that low-end torque hit like a V8 traditionally does. It doesn't have that grunt off the line. But when you get this thing running, holy cow. Once you get over about 4,000 RPMs, that's when this thing comes to life. And this thing just roars. And it pulls like a train all the way to 8,000, even beyond. I've never taken this thing to 8,000, but for what I have pulled on this thing, it pulls hard once you pass 4,000 RPM. I don't want to go nuts today. It's a little cold outside. These Cup 2s are kind of a no-no for going crazy when it's cold with these Cup 2 tires outside. The transmission, Tremec 3160. There's a reason why everyone rants and raves about this transmission. It's well built, it's well put together, it's durable, and you feel the engagement of each cog in each gear. Really solid, positive feel. It's not notchy like the old Tremec T56s were in the old Vipers or Vettes or Mustangs. It doesn't have that notchiness, even when it's cold outside. It goes into gear nicely without grinding or having that notchiness to it. So this car is very, very well mannered as a street car. You think with this thing being purpose built as a track weapon the way this thing is, that it would just be a basket case on the street. It's not. It's a very well mild-mannered street car. It is obviously it's stiff, but it's not unusable. You definitely could daily drive this car. Some people do. Most people won't, understandably, but you could daily drive this car. It's got, you know, good amount of amenities in it if you get with the technology package, or if you get more than just a base car. You can get it with pretty much most of the features that you're going to have in your standard Mustang. So it's pretty well equipped. You can drive it around. I drive this car a fair amount. I don't commute with it, but I try to use it on the nice days if I need to go somewhere and, you know, pick something up that doesn't involve something large or heavy where I need to go to my Raptor for that. This car is not for drag racing. It's not for burnouts. This is not that type of car. It doesn't have the low-end power for that. It's not set up like something with a blower like a GT500 or a Hellcat or something like that. So that's one thing that I think some people were somewhat kind of disappointed with. This ain't your traditional Mustang where you treat it like that. This is designed to be fast, but it's designed to be like racetrack fast, not burnouts and drag strip fast. It's got a drag strip setting on the controls. It'll run like low 12s in the quarter mile, but again, this is not set up for this, for drag racing. It's, you know, with the sticky Cup 2 tires on it, it's set up to be a well-balanced all-around car, and it really is. This is truly a sports car. You know, a lot of people refer to Mustangs as muscle cars, pony cars. This is a sports car. Everything is very, very good on this car. It's not, you know, crazy power, but you sacrifice your handling and, you know, your stiffness and maybe some other aspects for monster levels of power. The power is very good. This car pulls very strong, but everything is well balanced out. This is a very equally built car in all aspects. It turns very, very well. It handles well. It stops really, really good with these massive Brembo brakes on this thing. And when you want to run through the gears, this thing runs pretty good through every gear. Really good, well-balanced, all-around car. And that's one of the things that really attracted me to this. Now, I know a lot of with how fast technology is evolving, there's a lot of better aspects in cars, like with the DCT and the GT500. There's aspects that they've put in cars that made them better. So this is kind of probably going to be one of the last sort of, it's not a completely analog car, but last analog car of this type. Manual transmissions, I think, are not long for the future. Same thing with V8s. You know, a lot of car companies are starting to focus on hybrids or getting away from manuals. So this might very well be the last of its kind, and that's what attracted me to this car. This could very well be the last V8 manual transmission Shelby ever built. That's a real possibility. Electric cars are coming on faster than anybody expected. They're coming on super, super fast, and I think that there's a very distinct possibility this is the beginning of the end for a car like this. So and then as far as the reactions of this car, now this isn't anything crazy like the way my Viper was. My Viper, like, everyone would go nuts about that car. That was the car where everyone would come up to you at the gas station, they'd wave at you, they'd stick their phones out the windows. This thing, it kind of blends in because, yeah, it's essentially an S550 platform, but not only do Mustang people recognize this car enthusiasts recognize this car. This car really helped bridge the gap to get, I think, enthusiasts from Japanese cars and European cars kind of to look at American cars. I get thumbs up from everything from BMW M owners, S2000 owners, anything, Toyota 86, all enthusiast level cars. I always get thumbs up from people that know cars, or driving enthusiasts, car enthusiasts, people that know what they're looking at, because this car is distinct enough from a Mustang where people who are into cars are able to easily identify this as a GT350. And then as far as the values of these things, I don't buy cars to make money. I try to be smart with my car purchases, so to limit my loss as a depreciating asset, which this thing is. But the values on these things are up significantly. Now, pretty much everything is up right now. Almost every car is up in value. It's end of 2021. We've seen like explosive levels of growth with a lot of cars, and this thing is no exception to that rule. I paid sticker for this car. I got very lucky when I bought this thing. I kind of jumped into this game a little bit late, But I got really lucky, and the car is up significantly. Now, I have no intention of selling this thing anytime soon, because I think this is the end for a lot of the aspects, like I said, in this car. But the values are up significantly. I mean, even the standard GT350 is up quite a bit. So if you own one of these, if you've had it for a while, you're going to do good eventually with the resale. I don't think values are going to go down a lot. They'll probably settle when things are a little bit less crazy than they are right now. But the values, I think, are going to hold solid, especially as time goes on and there's less and less cars like this available. And probably one of the last main points I want to make with this thing is drive this car. Too many people buy this thing, they stick in their garage, they leave the bags in the seats, they throw a cover on it, and it never sees the light of day again, other than to maybe wash it once in a while. Because so many people are petrified to lose value in this car, especially now with the values being up so much. They don't drive it. They sell these things years later with like 100 miles on them. This is an incredible car. There's a reason why virtually every big YouTuber and every professional driver that drove this thing said this car was absolutely incredible. They ranted and raved about this car. They absolutely loved it, because this car is absolutely incredible. And I think if you buy one of these, you spend the money, you do your research, you purchase one of these cars, you're kind of losing a great opportunity to enjoy a car like this. If you're so worried about, oh, I got to make a buck, I got to keep the value in it, because you may sell a car like this and then you may not be able to replace it with anything else, with all these car values being crazy and electric cars coming on so fast. So, you don't have to daily drive it, you don't have to rack the miles up, but, put 1,000 miles a year on the car. That's like what I do, 1,000, 1,500 miles a year. It's going to maintain the value, and you'll have a great experience. You'll get to know what this car is about. This car is absolutely incredible. It feels like such a purpose-built, great car, more than just a regular Mustang. It's absolutely amazing what they were able to do with this car for the price. And you can get parts for this car. It's not like my 2000 Cobra R was, where like the parts were absolutely unobtainium. And you're always worried about, oh man, if something happens to this car, am I going to be able to get parts because it's so one-off? They didn't make a ton of these things, but they made enough where parts are plentiful. You can get them. You don't have to worry about it. Everyone's so scared about the wheels, the wings, all the parts in this car. And they are expensive, no doubt, but you can get them. If something happens, you can get them. And buy this car and enjoy it. I love this car. It's absolutely incredible. So, and before we go, let's open the valves a little bit. So, like I said, buy it, enjoy it, and drive it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.